We've been talking about Samson this last week and what he looked like, whether he was a 5 foot tall midget or 3 foot tall and the power of God came upon him, or if he was 7 foot tall and a powerful man, like they have him portrayed in most of the movies about Samson and Delilah. But let's go back and look at what his requirements were. Now we know that he was a miraculous birth, and how many Nazirites that we know of in the Bible? How many of those do we know of? Nazirite. A Nazarene, you know, Jesus was a Nazarene. He was from Nazareth. But a Nazirite was a special vow that a person took to become a voluntary priest and to set aside, and that he had a holy life. In the Bible we have Samson named as a Nazirite. We have Samuel named as a Nazirite. We have John the Baptist named as a Nazirite. And who else? The Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul. Yeah. And also, Jesus was not a Nazirite. Jesus was not a Nazirite. He never was. That's one thing we need to understand. Now let's go back in the book of Numbers and look and see what a Nazirite actually was. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel." Now, the first 5 books in the Bible are written by Moses. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And that is what we call the Law of Moses, or whatever, right? And that took place in church history, basically right here. This is the Egyptian bondage here. The nation of Israel is called out and named. And during this period of time, here is when Moses, right here, receiving the law. Now, Samson is over here, further on in here, and then the kings after that. But right here, this law that we're getting is from Moses, God to Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, and tell them, when a man or a woman makes a special vow," the vow, number 6 in verse 1, okay, and when a woman or a man makes a special vow, the Nazirite, to dedicate himself or herself to the Lord, okay, women, we don't know any women basically, but he shall abstain from wine. Wine. Now wine has alcohol in it, but evidently it's not the alcohol that God is prohibiting. It's not the alcohol. It's the grapes. Let's look at the rest of it. He shall abstain from wine and strong drink. That means alcohol. He shall drink no vinegar. No vinegar. We have vinegar we cook with and whatever. No, he can't have any vinegar. Whether it's made from wine or whether he shall drink he shall not drink any grape juice. Now that's ganomatastation amplu, again in Hebrew. It is a grape juice. Doesn't have alcohol in it. If it's 2 or 3 weeks old, it's going to have a little bit of alcohol in it, if it's not pasteurized. He shall not drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh or dried grapes, no raisins and no grapes. All the days of his separation he shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin of the grape. And all the days of the vow of separation no razor shall pass over his head. In other words, he cannot cut his hair, nor can she cut her hair. He shall be holy until the days are fulfilled for which he is separated to the Lord. Now the words Nazareth and Nazirite basically are the same word. It means to divide, to split, to separate. Root separates, limbs separate. You have a tree out there, it doesn't just come up like that. It has limbs separated on it. That's Nazir. All the days of his separation he shall not eat anything produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin, and all the days of his vow of separation no razor shall pass over his head, and he shall be holy until the days are fulfilled which he separated himself to the Lord. And he shall let the locks of his hair on his head grow long. The Nazirite, the Nazirites had longer hair. When you saw one of them, you knew instantly that this guy is probably a Nazirite. All the days of his separation to the Lord he shall not go near a dead person. He shall not make himself unclean for his father or for his mother. If his mother and father dies, he cannot go near them. For his brother or for his sister, if his brother or sister dies, he cannot go near them. When they die, because of his separation to God, it's on his head. In other words, his separation is on his head. It is a vow according with his life. He took this vow with his life. That's what it means on his head. All the days of his separation he is holy to the Lord. He's separated unto God. Now, we know what Samson did. We know what John the Baptist did. John the Baptist followed the rules. But if a man dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles his dedicated head of hair, then he shall shave his head on that day. When he becomes clean, he shall shave it on the 7th day. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, to the priest, to the doorway of the tent of the meeting. Now he's going to take 2 doves. This is if his Nazirite vow is interrupted. Okay, so he brings 2 doves or 2 turtle doves or pigeons to the tent of the meeting, and they take one and they pull its head almost all the way off. It's bleeding, it's dying, but they take and they have a basin now of water that had to come from a stream or a river. It couldn't be from a cistern. It had to be living water. And they would dip that bird, or take that bird's blood and drain it into that basin. Then they would take the other bird and dip it in that and set it free. And that was also the way they offered for the offering for the leper. That represented Jesus Christ dying for us, and we are dipped in his blood, basically. And we are set free. And the priest shall offer one for a sin offering, the other for a burnt offering, and make atonement for him concerning his sin because of the dead person. And that same day he shall consecrate his head, and shall dedicate to the Lord his days as a Nazirite, and shall bring a male lamb, a year old, for a guilt offering. But the former days shall be void, because his separation was defiled, in other words, interrupted. Now this is the law of the Nazirite, when the days of his separation are fulfilled. He shall bring the offering to the doorway of the tent, and this is a 4-fold offering. 4-fold offering. He shall present his offering for the Lord, 1 male lamb, a year old, without defect or blemish, for a burnt offering. 1 ewe lamb, 1 girl, female lamb, a year old, without defect, for a sin offering. And 1 ram without defect for a peace offering. And that's not all. And a basket of unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, along with their grain offerings and their libations. Then the priest shall present them before the Lord, and shall offer his sin offering and his burnt offering, and he shall offer the ram for sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, together with a basket of unleavened cakes, and the priest shall likewise offer his grain offering and his libation. Then the Nazirite shall shave his head, his dedicated head, of hair at the doorway of the tent. Not in the sink, Marilyn. At the doorway of the tent. And take the dedicated hair of his head and put it on the fire which is under the sacrifice of peace offerings. They're going to burn the hair up. They're going to burn all the hair. And the priest shall take the ram's shoulder when it has been boiled, and one unleavened cake out of the basket, and one unleavened wafer, and shall put them on the hands of the Nazirite after he has shaved his dedicated hair. And the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. It is holy for the priest, together with the breast offering and waving, and the thigh offered by lifting up, and afterward the Nazirite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazirite who vows his offering to the Lord according to his separation, in addition to what else he can afford according to his vow which he takes, so he shall do according to the law of separation. Now, when Samson's mother was visited by Jesus in his pre-incarnate form, and he told her, I don't want you, she was going to become basically a Nazirite in action. Because in her was going to be miraculously conceived Samson. And Samson means what? Do you remember what Samson means? Samson? Samson means sunlight. Sunlight. All right. Now, let's look at Samson. Let's see if he followed any of the rules. Okay? See if he followed any of the rules. He's supposed to be, he's a voluntary priest. When a man dedicated himself to the law of Nazirite, he was not supposed to come near women either. He was separated. When a priest was serving as a priest, he could not go home and be with his wife. He was separated. He was holy unto the Lord. Separated. The word saint means not of earth. We as God's children are saints of God. Verse chapter 16 now, Samson went to Gaza, and he saw a harlot there and went into her. Did he keep the law? No. He drank wine. He ate honey out of a dead carcass of a lion. He married a Philistine. And what about the Philistines? He's going to fight Philistines, isn't he? He's going to go on, and the Philistines, what does the name Philistine mean?
Barbaric.
It means uncivilized, uncouth. It means reckless. It means crude. Now, the Philistines were a fierce tribal people. They were referred to in the Bible as the sea people a long time ago. And the Philistines probably migrated from Crete or Caphtor in the Mediterranean Sea and into what we call the land of Canaan, or Canaan land, or now it's called Palestine, after them, in Genesis 10 and Amos 9 and 7. Their presence there was so prominent in the Bible that the Bible just sprinkled with the word Philistine all over. They were there along the Mediterranean Sea. The early times of the Philistines, there was a what we might call a family of kings. And the family of kings was called Abimelech. Abimelech. Now, Abimelech was ruled by one man, originally. By one man. And they were more what we might call friendly toward Israel than they were later, in later times. In later times, they were being ruled by a confederation of 5 kings, or 5 lords. But we know that Abimelech, that Abraham went down into Egypt. He went down into Egypt and he sold his wife. He was a used wife salesman, remember? He was a used wife salesman. He sold Sarah to Pharaoh. Pharaoh gave him his daughter, Hagar. She was his daughter by a concubine. And so he gives her Hagar as a political marriage. Well, he finds out God absolutely curses his household. And then he accuses Abraham of being dishonest, which he was. And then he tells him, get out of my land, go. Take everything I gave you. Anything you touch, take with you. Just go. And then what happens? He goes down into the land of the Philistines. And it's Abimelech at that time. And he goes down to Abimelech. And what does he do with Abimelech? Would you like to have a wife, Abimelech? Look how pretty she is. Now he goes down into Egypt and he gets a lot of camels, he gets a lot of servants, he gets all kinds of things. And now he goes to Abimelech, and Abimelech said, I'd like to marry Sarah. She's pretty. This will be a political marriage also. And so he goes there, and then he looks down there and he realizes in a dream, a hypnotic dream, hypnotic trance, hypnosis, God tells him, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Don't touch that woman. That is his wife. So he goes, and why in the world, I am blameless in this situation, why in the world did you sell me your wife? And now God's going to kill me. And this is really, it's a funny story in all reality with Abimelech, and this is a Philistine now, the sea people. He goes back in there and he said, now, you go down and have Abraham pray for you. He's a prophet. He's also a used wife salesman and a crook. But you have him pray for you because he's my prophet. Well, now the Abimelech, this time is over with. And now we have these 5 Philistine lords. And they're a real problem with Israel. At the beginning, Abraham and also Isaac did the same thing to Abimelech. Different Abimelech. He went down there and sold him his wife. And then the guy's looking down and sees him having sexual relationships with this woman. He said, this isn't your sister. This is your wife. And so he sends him away with goods and whatever. Now, we have a different group of Philistines, even though genetically they're the same. Now, Moses went to Gaza, and he saw a harlot there, and he had sexual relationships with her. And when it was told to the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night, saying, let us wait until the morning light, then we will kill him. Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he rose up and took hold of the doors of the gate and of the post, and pulled them up out of the ground. Now these were terribly strong gates. Samson goes over there and pulls the gates out of the ground. And these big, heavy gates, bronze gates many times, or at least bronze-plated gates, he talked off and he takes them up and carries them to the top of a mountain by himself. Then he put them on the shoulders and carried them to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. After this, it came about that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. Again, was he keeping his Nazirite vows? No. And her name was Delilah. Delilah, the word Lila, is night. Night. Darkness. What we might call the woman of the night. Her name means languishing. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, entice him and see where his great strength lies, and how we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him. God many times uses very imperfect vessels to carry out his will, doesn't he? And here is one. If you want a absolute picture of human nature, unleashed is Samson. Overpower him that we may bind him and to afflict him. Now here's a girl that he's laying in her arms. He has been with her. He's in love with this woman. She's beautiful. She's enticing. And she's unfaithful. Then he will reach and give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your strength, where your great strength is, and how that we may be bound to afflict you. Now he had touched dead things. He had gone into a harlot. He married a Philistine. As far as we know, he's drinking wine and getting drunk and all these other things that he's not supposed to do. But yet there's one vow that he has not broke yet. One of the rules of the Nazirite. And God keeps using this guy, keeps using him, keeps using him, keeps using him. And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh ropes, that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like other men. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh cords that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in wait in the inner room. The inner room's the bathroom, by the way. Okay? The toilet. And she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the cords as if they were of tow. When it's been touches with fire, it's like burned ropes. So his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah, now here is Samson. He must be crazy in love with this woman. Because he ought to be able to figure out, the woman keeps trying to find out where all of his strength is, and every time there's Philistines around. If he really told her the truth, guess what's going to happen to him? He's going to be in a lot of trouble. But he still hasn't broken the last vow. His head is still holy unto the Lord. Okay? Because his hair is there. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have deceived me and told me lies. I'm lying to you, but don't you lie to me. That's a nice kind of a wife, girlfriend to have, isn't it? And now please tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if you bind me tightly with new ropes which have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah bound him. She took ropes, bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson, for the men were laying in the bathroom again, in the inner room, in the toilet. But he snapped the ropes from his arms like a thread. Then Delilah says to Samson, up to now, you have deceived me and told me lies. Who's deceiving who here? You tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if you weave 7 locks of my hair with a web and fasten it with a pin, then I shall become weak like any other man. He's getting closer to the truth, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's in trouble. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his hair and wove them into the web, and she fastened it with a pin and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he woke up from his sleep, and he pulled out the pin of the loom and the web. And she said to me, how can you say I love you? How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? What should Samson have said? How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? This man's a fool. He's a dedicated fool. You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your strength is. And it came about when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, that his soul was annoyed unto death. And then he tells her. And he told her that all was in his heart, and he said to her, a razor has never come upon my head. For I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like other men. The last vow, the last one, he's going to break. Then Delilah, what does her name mean? Languishing, the woman of the night. The woman of the night saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, and she sent and called the lords of the Phillips, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart. Now we're talking about Samson now. He's broken every one of the vows of the Nazirite so far. There's a chair right there. For he has told me all that in his heart. Samson was an unwilling Nazirite. He followed the Lord in that when God's Spirit would come upon him, he would go do what God told him to do. But in the meanwhile, his life was a shambles, wasn't it? He married a Philistine. He killed a lion. A lion is an unclean animal. The bees made a nest in the lion's carcass, and he went back by there and he got the honey out of there. Not only did he take this unclean honey and eat it himself, which he wasn't supposed to do, but he took it and gave it to his mother and father. Then he goes and to a prostitute and was with this prostitute, and then he falls in love with this woman of the night, this Delilah. And she keeps telling him, you don't love me. Tell me wherein your strength lies. And finally he just weakens down and he tells her, I'm a Nazirite. She tells her the whole story. I'm a Nazirite. And he was holy unto the Lord, no matter what he did with his life before, but now the last vow is broken. The law of the Nazirite. Where his strength. And Delilah saw that he told her all that was in his heart. He sent and called the lords of the Philistine. How many of them are there? 5 lords now, not just Abimelech. Saying, come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her, and they brought the money in their hands. And she made him sleep on her knees. Now, boy, she must have got him drunk, too. She made him sleep on her knees and called for a man. He had to come and shave off his 7 locks of his hair. Now, basically, what they did is took either a sharp stone, like obsidian, or else a sharp knife, and they would cut it little by little. And she began to afflict him. And his strength left him. She began to afflict him. What did she do to him? Bite him? Claw him? What did she do to him? And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. Now his name means sunlight, but this boy is sure goofy. You think he was in the dark all the time. And he woke from his sleep and he said, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Every other law, every other edict that God gave for a Nazirite, he had broken all of them. But now he breaks the last one, and they shave his head, they cut his hair, they give him a haircut. You could always tell a Nazirite holy unto the Lord because he had longer hair. John the Baptist. Evidently, Paul had long hair. Samson had, or Samuel had long hair. Then the Philistines seized him, and what the first thing to do to him? He never would see Delilah again. They gouged out his eyes. And they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with the bronze chains. And he was a grinder in the prison. he would go around and grind. That was a woman's job, by the way. Grinding was a woman's job. They made him like a woman now. You're a woman now, said. However, the hair he had began to grow. Again, after it had been shaved off. Now the lords of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. What they said. Now, the Philistines were sea people, weren't they? All right. A Dagon is dog. Dog means fish. This is the fish god. Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands. Even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. If so happened that when they were in high spirits, that they said, call for Samson, that he may amuse us. So they called for Samson from the prison. And how he entertained them, I do not know, but he entertained them. They just laughed at him, I guess. And they made him stand between the pillars of the building. Now, the foundation stones of the building, all the way to the building were on these stones, okay? Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. There were about 3,000 men and women who were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. This is a great big stone building, and they have the second story up there, and evidently there's maybe seats in it, and they're looking down upon Samson. And then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me. Please strengthen me just this one time more, O God, that I may at once be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he braced himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He said, my journey is over. And he bent with all his might, so that the house fell upon the lords and all the people who were in it, so that the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he killed in his life. Then his brothers and his father and his household came down, and they took him. And they brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he judged Israel for 20 years. For 20 years he had judged Israel. 20 years a rebellious judge, and 20 years a rebellious child. In 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, it says, "For I do not want you to be ignorant and unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud, all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and into the sea. And all drank the same spiritual, or all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. Now these things happened to them as an example for you." Why, how many times do we have to go around the same mountain over and over and over again? How many times do we have to make the same mistakes over and over again? That we should not crave evil things as they craved. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. The people sat down to eat and drank and stood up to play. Let us not act immorally, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Let us not try the Lord, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. Nor grumble, as some of them did, and were destroyed by destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example for us, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Our Father, help us take this message to our hearts. Help us to learn not to go around the mountain again and again and again. Listen to you the first time. And even though you use this great man, this judge of Israel, and we saw how imperfect he is as we are, help us follow you, for we are saints unto God, unto you, in this New Testament times. Father, please forgive me where I fail you, and use this message wherever it goes in the world. In Jesus' name I pray.